Hey guys, Stephen Belusik with Camshaft School, and I'm here to demonstrate how to take a measurement that your camshaft supplier may ask you for when trying to determine if you have enough piston-to-valve clearance to run a particular camshaft. And the measurement we're going to be measuring is called valve drop. Now, valve drop measures the distance between when the valve is fully closed on the seat and when it either comes in contact with a flat surface that the head is sitting on like this, or assembled on the engine, which we'll show you later. This I kind of call the benchtop valve drop or flat surface valve drop. And we're going to be measuring how far I can open this valve before the valve makes contact with the tabletop. And basically what I've got set up here is I've got a dial indicator set up on the valve tip. And it's very important when you set up the dial indicator on the valve tip that the axis of the dial indicator is the same as the axis of the valve. If it's not, it will introduce inaccuracies because it's traveling on a different axis. So after you get it all set up, one quick trick you can do to help you visualize, besides looking at it this way, maybe looking at it this way, looking at it this way again to visualize it. When you depress the valve, if the tip of the dial indicator tracks across the surface in any direction of the valve tip, like when you depress it, if the dial indicator tracks across the surface, then it's not on the same axis. If it is on the same axis, the dial indicator will stay centered on the valve tip. So that's like a double check over and above just visualizing whether it's on the same axis. Now, it doesn't have to be to 10th of degrees. If you get it within a degree or so, the measurement's going to be accurate enough for what you're doing. But basically, this is a valve drop measurement where we're measuring how far the valve moves from when it's resting on the seat. You see we got a lightweight checker spring on here. Don't try to do this with your regular valve spring because it's not going to happen. So you've got a lightweight checker spring on here that allows you to depress the valve with your hand pressure. And being careful not to touch or disturb the dial indicator while you do it. You just press down, and I don't know if you can see from this distance, I'll give you a close-up. But the dial indicator is rotating when you press it down. Okay, here's a close-up. We've got the dial indicator still set up on the exhaust, and really the point of this close-up is so that you can see how the dial indicator moves and how I'm pressing down on the valve without touching the plunger of the dial indicator. So as you can see, as we press it down, the needle moves counterclockwise, right? Counterclockwise when we open the valve, clockwise when we close it. So 100 thousandths, 200 thousandths, 300 thousandths, and 332 thousandths for the exhaust. So that's what's going on when you see it up close. This is how the dial indicator and the plunger is interacting with the valve tip as we depress the valve. So now we'll go on to the assembled valve drop, the one that really makes life easy for everybody if you have the ability to do that. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get the short block ready to do the assembled valve drop. And before we can put the cylinder head on the engine, the head gasket and the cylinder head on the engine to do the assembled valve drop, we've got to make sure that the cylinder that we're measuring, that the piston is at its highest point. It's at top dead center, right? So in order to do that, we've got a dial indicator assembly here with this little magnetic bridge that, sticks to the block with magnets. If you have an aluminum block, you'll have to come up with another arrangement, which isn't very hard in this case. But this one's magnetic. We got an iron block. This old poncho's got an iron block, so it's going to make it real easy. And we're going to set this dial indicator on top of the block so that we can make sure that the piston is absolutely at its highest point with the dial indicator. So when we do that, and I'll rotate this a little bit, you can see it in this hole over here. We'll look at the number 3 cylinder. You'll notice that these pistons have a dome on them, and they have what's called a single eyebrow relief, which means the center of the piston right above the wrist pin is on an angle. And you really don't want to measure that on an angle. If the dial indicator tracks across the surface of the piston and it's on an angle, it's going to skew your measurements. So we're going to use the quench area being directly above the wrist pin. So with piston rock, as close as you can get directly over the wrist pin, it'll eliminate variations in your measurement due to piston rock. So we'll go ahead. We're going to measure cylinder 1 though, and we got to watch out because this piston has a slight dome in it, and so you have to be careful that the dome doesn't hit your bridge and cause your bridge to move, which would, of course, give you an inaccurate measurement. So we're going to position this in such a way that we can measure the quench area, the flat surface on top of the piston and the quench area, without being disturbed by the adjacent piston. And I think that's pretty close. So now I'm going to use this ratchet to rotate the engine until the piston comes up to the top. And then we're going to look at this dial indicator to verify when the piston is at its highest point. So now we're going to pull this dial indicator off, and we're going to stick a head gasket on here because the thickness of that head gasket matters. You want to duplicate everything the same as when the engine is going to be assembled and ready to run, so that your valve drop measurement truly represents your true clearances. So now we've got this at 0. I'm going to pull this off. I'm going to stab a head gasket on this thing, put the cylinder head on, put a couple head bolts on and snug them up. We're not going to torque it. You'll probably lose a couple thousandths with compressing the head gasket, depending on what kind of head gasket you're using. But we're not going to be concerned with that. You know, if you want to add a couple thousandths in for extra safety, extra margin of error, that's cool. That's a good thought. So we're going to put the head gasket on, put the head on, and then I'm going to demonstrate the assembled valve drop measurement that your camshaft supplier might need to assure that you've got enough piston to valve clearance to run a particular camshaft. Okay, we're back. We've got the cylinder head installed on the engine, and we got the head gasket in there, a couple bolts snugging it up, not torqued down. Good enough for this measurement. Now, as you can see, we've got the dial indicator set back up. It's on the exhaust valve this time, and it's all centered up. I made sure that when I depress the valve, that the plunger tip doesn't track across the valve. So that's a secondary check, a good indicator that the axis of the dial indicator is lined up with the axis of the valve, so that we get an accurate measurement. So let's depress the valve and see how many rotations we get out of this dial indicator, and how much exhaust valve drop, assembled valve drop, we have on this particular engine. Let's have a look. Oh, by the way, the dial indicator is already zeroed. I did that before I turned the camera on, so we don't have to zero the dial indicator now. I've already done it. Okay, so we got 1 revolution, 2 revolutions, 3 revolutions, 4 revolutions, 5 revolutions, 560 thousandths. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 60 thousandths. 560 thousandths exhaust valve drop. So now I'm going to release this and move it over. But before I do, I'm at Muscle Machining engine machine shop right now, and the owner Johnny just came in and said, you can use that, but I've got a much better one. And the reason why better matters in this, if I were to put the camera up close, if I tap on the top of this, just tapping on the top of this, it always returns to 0. But just tapping on the top of this needle's moving 6 or 7 thousandths, okay? That tells you that while this, it always returns to 0, there's some movement in this fixture. Now, in all fairness, this particular dial indicator, the spring inside, there's not a lot of force to cause this fixture to deflect. But if you tap on it, it's moving 6 or 7 thousandths. You probably can't see the needle from there, but if I were to pull it up close, it's moving 6 or 7 thousandths. Johnny brought in this Noga, N-O-G-A brand, and if you look at it, the joints and the fixture itself, the shafts are just much thicker. And when you tighten this thing down, this thing is really rigid. So I'll put this on the intake valve, and we'll see how much less this deflects when I tap on the top of it. I'm betting it's going to be a lot less. Let's check it out. And, I probably don't have to tell you this, but always be as careful as you can with these precision instruments. They're very delicate. You drop it just once, it could be done. So keep that in mind. We got everything tight. Yeah, Now when I tap on this one, you probably can't see it from there, but when I tap on this one, of course it always zeroes back out, which is nice. That means it's not moving and staying out of alignment. This one moves a half of a thousandths. So obviously, the more expensive fixture, $150 fixture, $20-some, maybe $30-some fixture on Amazon, the more expensive fixture is going to deflect less. Also, this 2-inch dial indicator, inexpensive, maybe $20, $30 unit. The pressure that it takes to just press it and the smoothness is a little bit more difficult than this one. This one's a more expensive unit. I'm not sure what the cost on this one is. Takes less pressure to move the plunger, which means there's less pressure on the fixture, less likely to deflect. And also this little bezel that allows you to zero it. This one's a little stiff and sticky. This one's ultra smooth. So you can make all of your adjustments and take your measurements with a smoother, easier to move dial indicator with a more rigid fixture. You're just going to get better results. So, get the best equipment you can afford. And if you're working with less expensive equipment, do everything you can to eliminate deflection that could skew or give you an inaccurate measurement. Now let's go ahead and measure the intake valve assembled drop on this and see what we've got. As I said, we've got the fixture all set up. It's not tracking across the surface. It's true. The axis of the dial indicator is the same as the axis of the valve. And let's depress it and count the revolutions. Let's zero this thing out. Okay, it's zeroed. We're going to say 1 revolution, 2 revolutions, 3 revolutions, 4 revolutions, 5 revolutions, and about 30 thousandths. So the intake, the assembled intake valve drop is 530 thousandths. So you give this information, the intake assembled valve drop and the exhaust assembled valve drop measurements, to your cam supplier, and they can tell you if the camshaft that you want to run in this engine will have sufficient piston to valve clearance. And you'll be all set. You always, obviously, whenever you assemble an engine, when you finally get the camshaft in it, you should check it again. It's always just good procedure to check it again manually to make sure. But if the math is all right, it won't steer you wrong. Give your camshaft supplier these measurements, and his software will tell you if the camshaft that he's going to sell you is going to fit in your engine without any additional needed modifications, and your piston to valve clearance should be good. So that's how you measure assembled valve drop.